Hi everyone. Um, I have another tutorial for you. This one is well, recently I made a tutorial about how to do assaults in bold action, so infantry tactics. And this one is sort of a response to a viewer who asked, well, you seem to like assault armies, which I do. Um, and how would you counter that? What would be the counter against your moves? So this is sort of my thoughts on that. So defense against assaults in bold action. This is more or less a rookie tutorial. I don't think that good players they know all this. So this is for you noobs. Right. There are several points in an assault in bold action where the defender actually gets to do something, gets to choose something. Um, but the most important point is when the charge is declared. The attacking player gets an order dice and he declares an assault with one of his units. That unit then has to make an order test if they are pinned, um, and then they engage in the assault by measuring the straight line from the closest model to your closest model. Now, there are several points before this where you can avoid that charge. One of them is stay out of line of sight of enemy charge units. So if you're looking at an enemy list, which you always should do, right? Before a game starts, the first thing you do is you look at the enemy's list, you sort of figure out what does each part want to do. Then you talk about the table, and then you start the game. Basically, you just talk about the mission, and then you're up and running, right? But if you identify that there are certain units in the enemy's army that are assault units, that they have all SMGs or assault rifles or tough fighter or they're Gurkhas or Lancers or what have you, right? Um, Japanese bamboo spearmen. If you've identified those assault units, staying out of line of sight of them can actually mean that you don't get assaulted, right? And the most important bit is to stay out of line of sight of the closest model. I'll get back to that one. The other thing is simply stay out of range. So if you have got good eye measurement of range, and you can sometimes, if you shoot at an enemy unit, you measure how far is it to that enemy unit. If you have that in your mind, well, that unit was 24 inches away, which means this unit is 18 inches away. I'm safe. If you have that, then you can stay out of range and you can sort of skirmish. So when the enemy moves up to gain the assault, you move back. So staying out of range. And remember, the ranges here that are most important are 6 and 12. Pretty close to this range, right? So it's also something that where you sort of once you played a lot of games, you learn how far those 6 inches are just by looking at a table. Um, so and 6 is when the enemy assaulters are in terrain, when they have to traverse terrain somehow. When the assault happens, and 12 is of course in open ground. This becomes 9 and 18 for cavalry, of course. Then once the charge has been declared, you get to react. If you haven't done anything with your units, you get to react. Um, and there the choice is basically, do I shoot or don't I? There are actual instances where you don't want to shoot. Um, because remember, this is not an ambush. You don't get to shoot when it's most optimal to you. You shoot from where the charge starts. And that might be in hard cover with you just having 2 shots at that unit. That is not going to help you. Um, so for me, I shoot if I know that I'm going to lose my unit. If this is a charge that I'm definitely going to lose, I will shoot just to see if I can hurt 1 or 2 more of the attackers. Maybe give them a pin that might help later on for next turn, right? Then I'll shoot. Um, if I know that this is a charge that it's 50-50. Maybe I'm not going to hit anything anyway, and I want that unit to be able to move afterwards. I will not shoot. Because the shots are not an automatic, I think. You shouldn't view them as something you just have to do. Don't figure it out carefully and take your time when deciding whether or not to shoot. Remember that you shoot at the start of the assault, so it might not be very beneficial for you to shoot. Also remember that flamers can shoot. And it doesn't matter that the enemy starts their assault 12 inches away, they count as if they had shot at range. Everything can reach when you're shooting as defensive fire, which means that your flamer, yes, it might be long range, but a flamer to the face as you were charging in, that is not nice. And it ignores modifiers. So with engineer units or flamethrower teams, I would always shoot if the enemy charges me, just because that is going to hurt them if I hit. And in close combat, the flamethrower is not worth anything, so might as well fire it while I got it. So that is the reactions that you can do once the charge has been declared. Don't expect the shooting, by the way. Don't expect it to stop a charge. It almost never does. It will maybe damage the charges a little bit or give them a pin, and that's all for most dedicated charger units. Unless we're talking about inexperienced horde units. Inexperienced horde units that charge, they can really be damaged, and that can influence how an assault turns out, because that might be enough to tip the scales in your favor. Another thing that you can do is, and this is to do with the placement of your units, always try to avoid having straight lines to the enemy assault units. So use terrain and stay close to terrain. Don't move into the open. Always stays close to terrain so that the enemy has to move around the terrain or move across the terrain. That will mean that he has to fight simultaneously, which means that you get at least to hit him back. Most important, because once you've set up, and I mean, you've tried to avoid it as long as you can, it's not going to be forever. You've tried to make sure that you shoot or not, then at least try to make sure that you're placed so that you get to fight back, right? Because one of the main issues with fighting in bold action is if the enemy fights first, and there's a lot of them, because here bodies count more than veterancy. If there's a lot of them, they will damage you, and they will possibly win the close combat in the first round, where they just, there are 10 of them, there are 10 of you, 5 of them hit. That's 5 of you all of a sudden. You're definitely losing that close combat. So make sure that you fight simultaneously by avoiding straight lines to the enemy, because if he has to move in a curved line, if he has to snake around terrain or over terrain, you have to fight simultaneously. So what units are good for defense? I'd say Fanatics. Fanatics are really good in defense, especially because they will just keep fighting, right? They will just keep on trying to hurt the attackers for as long as there's at least 2 men in the unit. So Fanatics are really good on defense. Tough fighters as well. Tough fighters will most of the time, if the enemy sees that you have Fanatic or Tough Fighter, they will not assault you, because that fight turns into something that is always a little bit dicey, and you don't want to risk losing your good, expensive charging unit, Polish Lancer veterans or Gurkhas or what have you, to a small unit of tough fighters. That just sucks, right? So those two, and especially in combination with veterans, because veterans are hard to kill anyway. So you don't want to really try to. Veterans are always dicey as well, especially if you have small units of assaulters. I don't want to ever charge a unit of veteran with small units of assaulters. So I will make sure that I'm at least equal to, preferably twice as many as the veterans that I'm assaulting, because veterans, yeah, That's no good. Um, Assault weapons are also really good because they grant you Tough Fighter. Tough Fighter is a little bit better because that will mean you have range and can still fight close combat. Um, but assault weapons, of course, it means that you get extra shots and point blank, and so it's pretty dangerous to assault a unit that actually gets to use defensive fire. And flamers, of course, flamers are really good. Right, my tips and tricks. Small things that you can sort of train and try to do once you start figuring out how to do this, how to move against assaulters. If you have skirmish infantry, stay inside area terrain. If anything in your army is under threat from assaulters, stay in area terrain. Yes, it will grant the enemy cover because you're shooting through the area terrain out at him. Don't stand on the edge because that will mean he can charge you. Um, Stay inside the area terrain and shoot out through it. Yes, they'll get cover. That doesn't matter. You're there to skirmish. You're there to shoot. He's there to assault. So, and because you're inside area terrain, he will always be assaulting you simultaneously. Very important. So stay in the area terrain. And then go on ambush. Use ambush. And the ambush order is way underused and it's a really good order. Go on ambush. Because if you go on ambush, that will really hurt the assaulters when they charge, because that will mean that you can shoot at point blank range with no cover. Once they are right straight in your face, you just say, "This is where I shoot," and then all the SMGs and stuff you have, just hurt them as they come. Another thing that you can do is most assault units are pretty expensive, so this will mean that quite often your defensive skirmish type units, other units, you can sort of be 2 to 1 with them, and if um, you're 2 to 1, then you can go on ambush with both units. He can only assault one, but if he moves to assault one unit, the other unit will ambush him, and vice versa. So they will get double hurt once they assault. That assault will most likely never happen because you just locked him down. Um, so the more people you have on ambush, the better actually against assault units, because they'll just choose not to assault you. And if they do that, keep one of your units on ambush and then have the other unit pull away the ambush at the end of the turn, see if you can shoot. Next turn, give him a fire order, give him another fire order. If he starts assaulting you, you still have one unit on ambush. So 2 to 1. Also, have your units pretty close together. This is dangerous due to multi-rocket launchers in the game, right? But if you have your units close together, that will mean that if you lose one unit to assaulters, you'll have other units that can punish that assault unit, start shooting it. And most assault units don't like being pinned, unless they're Japanese Banzai chargers, fanatics and stuff. Most other units will dislike being pinned, because that 2 to 3 pins and they are down, they're out, they are not going to assault you again. And you can just start whittling them down to a degree where they become ineffective as assault units, which for me is around the four veterans. When my units end up at 4 veterans, I'm not assaulting anymore. 5, maybe even. Um, and to do that, you can draw the attack into kill zones. This is especially true if you have units in transport. Because if you have a unit in transport and that transport is assaulted, the unit will have to get out. So they make a disembark move, and that can be down in a kill zone where you want to draw the enemy assaulters. So the enemy assault will move around the truck and go down and kill your unit. Yes, they will most likely murder that unit, but suddenly they're standing in the open in a kill zone where you have 4 other units, including a howitzer loaded with HE, ready and waiting for them and looking straight at them, and they get only 1d6 of consolidation to get out of that kill zone, which is most likely not going to happen. So they will die. Um, and that's a really neat trick. If you're really, really good at this, and I had this happen to me once. I had a unit of Gurkhas charging a transport that my friend Michael had very cleverly set up for me to charge. And he had a lieutenant team, I think, in it, which he pulled out. And then he set them down behind the transport. And I couldn't actually reach that because the transport was in between areas of range. But according to the assault rules, I could reach them, so I moved down there. And he had an engineer unit on ambush with a flamethrower. I got flamed and I was dead. That was very clever. So he pulled me into an ambush, which was just waiting there for me to come. Very clever movement, very, very good defense against assaults, and I lost a whole unit of Gurkhas that way. So that can happen. Right, that was it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a little bit, maybe not. Let me know in the comments. Cheers.